June the 17th, 2025. 6:47 a.m. Tehran time. 37 million Iranians wake up to discover their money has vanished, not stolen, not transferred, erased, gone. As if it never existed. ATMs across Iran's capital city display a single, chilling message: service unavailable. Bank cards are rejected at grocery stores. Online banking portals show blank screens. Mobile banking apps crash repeatedly. And at 1-800 Bank Sepah branches nationwide, the doors remain locked. This isn't a technical glitch. This isn't a system failure. This is an act of digital warfare so sophisticated, so devastating, that it will force the world to redefine what constitutes an act of war in the 21st century. Because somewhere in the digital shadows, a group of hackers known only as Predatory Sparrow has just executed the most destructive financial cyberattack in human history. And their message is clear: we can erase you. To understand why Bank Sepah became ground zero for digital annihilation, you need to understand what this institution really was. Founded in 1925, Bank Sepah wasn't just Iran's oldest financial institution, it was the financial backbone of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC. For decades, Bank Sepah served a singular, clandestine purpose: helping Iran circumvent international sanctions. While the world believed economic pressure would force Iran to abandon its nuclear ambitions and ballistic missile program, Bank Sepah was quietly moving billions of dollars through a labyrinth of shell companies, proxy accounts, and offshore networks. U.S. Treasury documents reveal the scale of this operation. As of 2017, Bank Sepah served as the financial platform for Iran's Ministry of Defense and Armed Forces logistics, paying weapons dealers, nuclear scientists, and terrorist proxies across the Middle East. The bank didn't just manage military salaries, it financed Iran's ballistic missile development, it funded Hezbollah in Lebanon, it bankrolled Hamas operations in Gaza, it supported Houthi rebels in Yemen. Every dollar deposited by ordinary Iranian citizens was weaponized. In 2018, the United States reimposed full sanctions on Bank Sepah, designating it a supporter of weapons proliferation. Europe followed suit. But sanctions only work if you can track the money, and Bank Sepah had become a master of invisibility. The bank operated offices across Europe, Hamburg, Frankfurt, Paris, Rome, using subsidiary banks to launder transactions. It moved euros through Postbank of Iran. It exchanged currencies through Bank Tejarat. It maintained accounts at Europäische Iranische Handelsbank in Germany. The financial web was deliberately complex, designed to confuse investigators. But someone was watching, someone who understood this system better than the bankers themselves, someone who had been planning the perfect attack for years. They call themselves Gonjeshke Darande, Predatory Sparrow in Farsi, a name chosen deliberately to mock their target. In Persian culture, the sparrow represents something small, seemingly harmless. But this sparrow had talons. The group first emerged in July 2021 when Iran's national railway system suddenly collapsed. Digital displays across train stations throughout Tehran, Mashhad, Isfahan, and Shiraz began showing a cryptic message in Farsi: long delays due to cyberattack, cancelled. Beneath it, a phone number, the direct line to Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. The message was clear: call him and ask when your train is coming. Cybersecurity analysts investigating the attack discovered sophisticated malware they named Meteor Express, a three-phase digital weapon designed to obliterate computer systems completely. First, it erased files. Second, it locked users out of their accounts. Third, it destroyed the master boot record, making it impossible to restart computers. This wasn't hacking, this was digital execution. 3 months later, in October 2021, Predatory Sparrow struck again. This time, they disabled payment systems at over 4,000 gas stations across Iran. The timing was surgical, exactly 2 years after the Iranian government had attempted to cut fuel subsidies, sparking nationwide riots. Once again, fuel pump screens displayed the supreme leader's phone number with a message blaming the government for the disruption. Iranians couldn't buy gasoline. Transportation ground to a halt. Food deliveries stopped. Emergency services struggled to refuel ambulances. The country descended into chaos for 12 days. And Predatory Sparrow watched. But their most audacious attack came in June 2022, when they targeted the Khuzestan steel mill, one of Iran's largest industrial facilities. Hackers infiltrated the mill's human-machine interface software and manipulated the controls for molten steel production. Temperatures spiked, safety protocols failed, and then the impossible happened. Molten steel spilled across the factory floor, igniting a massive fire that consumed the facility. To prove their involvement, Predatory Sparrow posted screenshots of the mill's control systems with a chilling caption, "We did this." Iranian officials tried to claim it was an accident, but the evidence was irrefutable. For the first time in history, hackers had used cyberattacks to cause physical destruction on an industrial scale. Western intelligence agencies began investigating. Who was Predatory Sparrow? How did they possess such sophisticated capabilities? And most importantly, who was funding them? The answer, according to Iranian officials, was obvious: Israel. To understand the Bank Sepah attack, you must first understand the invisible war that's been raging between Israel and Iran for over 2 decades. A war fought not with missiles and tanks, but with malware and backdoors. It began in 2010 when a mysterious computer worm called Stuxnet infiltrated Iran's Natanz nuclear facility. The malware was unlike anything the world had ever seen, a sophisticated digital weapon that physically destroyed uranium enrichment centrifuges by manipulating their rotation speeds while showing operators that everything was normal. Over 1,000 centrifuges were destroyed before Iranian scientists realized they were under attack. US and Israeli intelligence were widely believed to be responsible. Iran retaliated. In 2020, Iranian hackers attempted to breach Israeli water treatment facilities, trying to manipulate chlorine levels in drinking water supplies, a cyber attack that, if successful, could have poisoned thousands. Israel blocked the attack and responded with devastating precision. The escalation continued. Iran targeted Israeli hospitals, power grids, and financial institutions. Israel hit back at Iranian oil refineries, military bases, and government networks. Each attack became more sophisticated, more destructive, more personal. By 2025, this shadow war had evolved beyond government-sponsored operations. Hacktivist groups, independent cyber militias motivated by ideology rather than state contracts, had entered the battlefield, and Predatory Sparrow was the most dangerous of them all. While Iranian officials insisted the group was directly controlled by Mossad, Israel's intelligence agency, Predatory Sparrow operated with a level of autonomy that suggested something more complex. They were either highly trained former intelligence operatives working independently, or an Israeli cyber unit operating under plausible deniability. Either way, they had access to world-class hacking tools and intimate knowledge of Iranian infrastructure. And in early 2025, they set their sights on the ultimate target, Bank Sepah. Not just to disrupt services, but to destroy the bank entirely, to erase it from existence. The first warning came in March 2025, 3 months before the catastrophic June attack. A different hacker group called Codebreakers announced they had infiltrated Bank Sepah's systems and stolen something unprecedented: 12 terabytes of confidential data. 12 terabytes. To put that in perspective, that's roughly 3 million hours of music, or 6,000 feature-length films. Except this wasn't entertainment. This was every secret Bank Sepah had tried to hide for decades. The codebreakers claimed their haul included account numbers, passwords, mobile phone numbers, residential addresses, and complete transaction histories for over 42 million individuals, nearly half of Iran's entire population. More disturbingly, the data included detailed information on military personnel, IRGC commanders, and government officials. The hackers made an unusual offer. They would keep the data private in exchange for $42 million in Bitcoin, exactly $1 per exposed individual. It was brazen, it was calculated, and it revealed the bank's vulnerability. Bank Sepah refused to pay. They had no choice. Acknowledging the breach would confirm that their security was compromised. Paying the ransom would legitimize criminal hackers and invite more attacks. And admitting that 42 million Iranians' data had been stolen would trigger a national crisis. So they did nothing. They hoped the hackers were bluffing. They hoped the breach wasn't as bad as claimed. They hoped the story would disappear. They were catastrophically wrong. Because while the codebreakers were negotiating, Predatory Sparrow was already inside Bank Sepah's network. Not to steal data, but to study it, to map every server, every database, every backup system, every failsafe. They weren't planning a robbery, they were planning an assassination. June 15, 2025. Tensions between Israel and Iran had reached a boiling point. Israeli fighter jets had conducted airstrikes on Iranian military facilities, targeting weapons depots and missile production sites. Iran vowed retaliation. Diplomats warned of imminent regional war. Behind the scenes, Predatory Sparrow activated their plan. They had been embedded in Bank Sepah's systems for months, moving silently through the network like ghosts. Now, with geopolitical tensions providing perfect cover, they prepared to strike. Their target wasn't just customer data, it was the bank's core infrastructure, the databases containing account balances, transaction records, loan agreements, and most critically, the backup systems designed to restore operations after a disaster. Predatory Sparrow intended to destroy everything simultaneously, ensuring no recovery was possible. On June 16th, at exactly 11:47 p.m. Tehran time, the attack began. The malware Predatory Sparrow deployed was a masterpiece of destructive engineering. Unlike traditional ransomware that encrypts data, this weapon simply deleted everything. Account balances deleted, transaction histories deleted, customer information deleted, backup files deleted, disaster recovery systems deleted. Bank Sepah's IT security team detected the intrusion within minutes, but by then it was too late. The malware had already spread through 87% of the bank's network, moving faster than human operators could respond. Every attempt to isolate infected systems failed. The hackers had disabled network segmentation protocols. Engineers tried to shut down servers to prevent further damage, but the malware had anticipated this, activating dormant payloads in systems administrators thought were safe. Like a hydra, every time they cut off one head, two more appeared. At 1:23 a.m., Bank Sepah's primary database server crashed, then the backup server, then the tertiary backup, then the off-site disaster recovery system. Within 90 minutes, every redundancy the bank had spent decades building was obliterated. At 2:47 a.m., ATMs across Tehran began displaying service unavailable, then Isfahan, then Shiraz, then Mashhad. Within 4 hours, every ATM connected to Bank Sepah, over 8,000 machines nationwide, was offline. At 5:30 a.m., the first Bank Sepah branches opened their doors for business. Except they couldn't conduct any business, customer account information was gone, tellers couldn't verify balances, managers couldn't access loan records. The bank had been reduced to an empty shell. At 6:47 a.m., Predatory Sparrow posted their claim of responsibility on Telegram, Twitter, and encrypted messaging platforms. The message was brief but devastating. "We have destroyed all data at Bank Sepah, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps' financial platform. This bank finances terrorism, ballistic missiles, and nuclear weapons programs. The Iranian people deserve better than having their savings weaponized against them." By mid-morning on June 17th, panic had spread throughout Iran. 37 million customers, nearly half the country's population, couldn't access their money. Small businesses that relied on Bank Sepah accounts couldn't pay suppliers. Government agencies couldn't process payroll. IRGC personnel couldn't receive salaries. The ripple effects were immediate and catastrophic. Without access to payment processing, grocery stores couldn't accept bank cards. Fuel stations demanded cash only, but customers couldn't withdraw cash from ATMs. Pharmacies struggled to process insurance claims. Hospitals delayed non-emergency procedures because patients couldn't pay. Iranian state media tried to downplay the crisis, claiming it was a temporary technical issue that would be resolved within hours. But the truth was far worse. Bank Sepah's IT engineers had discovered that not only was the data deleted, but the malware had also corrupted the bank's historical backups, some dating back years. Even if they could restore operations, they might never recover complete customer records. This created a nightmarish scenario. How do you operate a bank when you don't know how much money your customers actually have? If a customer claims they had $50,000 in their account, but the records are gone, how do you verify that? How do you prevent fraud? How do you maintain trust in the entire banking system? Bank Sepah had two choices: shut down completely until systems could be rebuilt from scratch, or attempt to operate using incomplete, potentially inaccurate data. Both options were catastrophic. But Predatory Sparrow wasn't finished. They had planned something even more audacious. On June 18th, just 24 hours after destroying Bank Sepah, the group announced they had simultaneously attacked Nobitex, Iran's largest cryptocurrency exchange. This wasn't about disruption, this was about permanent financial destruction. The hackers claimed they had seized control of $90 million worth of cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and various altcoins, and transferred it to inaccessible addresses. In cryptocurrency terms, this meant the money was sent to wallet addresses for which no private keys existed. The funds couldn't be retrieved by anyone ever. $90 million simply erased from existence. This was psychological warfare at its most sophisticated. Predatory Sparrow wasn't stealing to profit. They were destroying to send a message. The Bank Sepah attack had paralyzed Iran's traditional banking system. The Nobitex attack demonstrated that Iran's alternative financial systems, cryptocurrency exchanges used to circumvent sanctions, were equally vulnerable. Iranian officials were trapped in an impossible position. They couldn't admit the scale of the damage without triggering mass panic. But they also couldn't hide the crisis. Millions of citizens were affected. State television continued broadcasting reassurances while behind the scenes, emergency meetings convened at the highest levels of government. The IRGC, humiliated by the attack on their primary bank, vowed to hunt down Predatory Sparrow. Iranian state hackers launched retaliatory strikes against Israeli infrastructure, targeting power grids and water treatment facilities. The shadow war was escalating into something far more dangerous. Weeks after the attack, the full scope of the damage became clear. Bank Sepah would require at least 6 months to restore basic operations and potentially years to fully recover customer data, if recovery was even possible. The Iranian government quietly approached international cybersecurity firms, desperately seeking help to rebuild the bank's infrastructure. But US sanctions prevented most Western companies from providing assistance. Iran was forced to develop homegrown solutions using limited resources. For ordinary Iranians, the consequences were devastating. Customers with their life savings in Bank Sepah accounts faced months of uncertainty. Small businesses collapsed. Families struggled to pay rent and buy food. The attack had weaponized poverty. International observers noted a disturbing precedent. This was the first time a cyber attack had successfully destroyed a major financial institution's data infrastructure beyond immediate recovery. Previous attacks had disrupted services temporarily. This attack had committed financial murder. U.S. Treasury officials, despite their hostility to Iran's regime, quietly expressed concern about the humanitarian impact. When asked if the attack violated international law, officials provided carefully worded non-answers. The legal framework for cyber warfare remained hopelessly outdated. To this day, the true identity of Predatory Sparrow remains unknown. Iranian officials insist the group is directly controlled by Israeli intelligence. Israeli officials refuse to comment. Western intelligence agencies maintain strategic ambiguity. What is clear is that Predatory Sparrow possesses capabilities far beyond typical hacktivist groups. Their operations demonstrate intimate knowledge of Iranian infrastructure, access to sophisticated malware, and operational security so advanced that no member has ever been identified or arrested. Some cybersecurity experts believe Predatory Sparrow is a small team of former Israeli military intelligence operatives from Unit 8200, Israel's elite cyber warfare division. Others suggest they're Iranian dissidents trained and funded by Western intelligence agencies. A third theory proposes they're an autonomous group ideologically aligned with Israel but operating independently. The group's choice of targets reveals their strategic thinking. They don't attack civilian infrastructure for the sake of chaos. Every target, railways, fuel stations, steel mills, banks, serves a dual purpose, disrupting Iran's military-industrial complex while exposing the regime's vulnerability to its own citizens. Their messaging is equally calculated. By publishing the supreme leader's phone number during attacks, they mock the regime's authority. By destroying IRGC financial infrastructure, they undermine military operations. By framing attacks as protecting ordinary Iranians from their government's misuse of resources, they attempt to drive a wedge between the population and leadership. The Bank Sepah attack represents a terrifying milestone in the evolution of conflict. For the first time in history, a non-state actor or an intelligence operation masquerading as one successfully destroyed a major institution using nothing but code. Traditional warfare requires armies, tanks, missiles, and aircraft. Cyber warfare requires only skilled hackers, sophisticated malware, and internet access. The costs are minimal, the risks are low, attribution is nearly impossible, and the potential for damage is virtually unlimited. If Predatory Sparrow can erase a bank, what else can they erase? Power grids, hospital records, government databases, nuclear facility controls. The attack demonstrated that modern society's dependence on digital infrastructure has created existential vulnerabilities. Defense experts warn that the Bank Sepah attack will be studied and replicated by both nation-states and criminal organizations. China, Russia, North Korea, and numerous hacktivist groups are undoubtedly reverse engineering Predatory Sparrow's techniques. The next attack could target Wall Street banks, European financial institutions, or emerging market economies. International law has no framework for prosecuting cyber warfare. The Geneva Conventions don't cover digital attacks. The United Nations has no enforcement mechanism for cyber aggression. Countries can't agree on what constitutes an act of war in cyberspace. This legal vacuum creates a Wild West environment where anything is possible and nothing is punishable. As investigators continue analyzing the Bank Sepah attack, critical questions remain unanswered. How did Predatory Sparrow maintain access to Bank Sepah's systems for months without detection? The level of infiltration required to map the entire network, identify all backups, and position malware for simultaneous detonation suggests either catastrophic security failures or insider assistance. Why didn't Bank Sepah's security systems detect the March 2025 codebreakers breach? If hackers had already stolen 12 terabytes of data, why didn't that trigger alarms that might have prevented the June attack? Was the codebreakers' ransom demand a distraction? Some cybersecurity analysts theorize that the March breach and ransom demand were actually orchestrated by Predatory Sparrow themselves, a feint to make Bank Sepah focus on one threat while a more dangerous attack was being prepared. How many other Iranian institutions have Predatory Sparrow already infiltrated? If they could embed themselves in Bank Sepah for months, what prevents them from being inside other critical systems right now, waiting for the optimal moment to strike? What happens when someone uses these tactics against Western institutions? The techniques Predatory Sparrow pioneered are now public knowledge. Every sophisticated hacker group worldwide has studied this attack. How long until a similar attack targets banks in New York, London, or Tokyo? Lost in the geopolitical analysis and cybersecurity discussions are the millions of ordinary Iranians whose lives were devastated by an attack they didn't cause, targeting a regime they didn't choose, in a conflict they never wanted. Elderly pensioners who kept their life savings in Bank Sepah suddenly couldn't access retirement funds. Young families lost down payment savings for homes. Small business owners saw years of work evaporate when their commercial accounts disappeared. The Iranian government, already struggling with economic sanctions, offered little assistance. State media blamed Zionist terrorists and promised compensation that never materialized. For many Iranians, the attack reinforced a bitter reality. They are pawns in a conflict between powers that view human suffering as acceptable collateral damage. Human rights organizations documented numerous cases of families unable to afford medical care because their healthcare payment cards, linked to Bank Sepah accounts, no longer functioned. Students couldn't pay university tuition. Migrant workers couldn't send remittances to relatives in rural provinces. Predatory Sparrow's stated justification that they attacked Bank Sepah to prevent the Iranian regime from financing terrorism rang hollow for citizens who simply wanted to feed their children and pay their rent. The hackers had positioned themselves as liberators, but the immediate effect was indiscriminate suffering. This raises profound ethical questions about cyber warfare. Can attacks that devastate civilian populations ever be justified? If Predatory Sparrow successfully degraded Iran's military financing capabilities, does that excuse the harm to millions of innocent people? Where is the line between strategic warfare and collective punishment? Intelligence agencies across the Middle East, Europe, and North America are now operating under a chilling assumption: the Bank Sepah attack was not an endpoint, but a proof of concept. Predatory Sparrow demonstrated what's possible. Now, everyone is vulnerable. Israeli officials, speaking anonymously, have warned that Iranian state hackers are developing retaliatory capabilities designed to target Israeli financial institutions with similar destructive techniques. The shadow war is entering a new, more dangerous phase, where the goal is not disruption but annihilation. Russia and China, observing the Bank Sepah attack, are reportedly adapting similar tactics for potential use against Western financial systems. US Cyber Command has conducted classified simulations of Bank Sepah-style attacks on American institutions. The results were reportedly catastrophic. Private cybersecurity firms have noted a surge in reconnaissance activity, hackers probing banking networks, testing defenses, mapping infrastructure. These aren't random attacks, they're preparation for something larger. The International Monetary Fund issued a confidential warning to member states in August 2025, advising central banks to review disaster recovery protocols and assume that sophisticated attackers already have access to critical systems. The warning specifically cited the Bank Sepah incident as evidence that destructive cyberattacks on financial institutions now represent existential threats. Financial regulators are scrambling to implement new security requirements, but the harsh reality is that many banks, even in advanced economies, rely on decades-old legacy systems with known vulnerabilities. Upgrading these systems would cost billions and take years. Most institutions are gambling that they won't be the next target. Since the Bank Sepah attack, Predatory Sparrow has gone silent. No new attacks, no public statements, no claims of responsibility for other incidents. The group has vanished into the digital shadows as mysteriously as they emerged. Some analysts believe the group has disbanded, considering their mission accomplished. Others suspect they're planning something even more ambitious, studying defenses and waiting for the optimal moment. A third theory suggests that geopolitical pressure, possibly from Israel's own government, forced them to cease operations after the Bank Sepah attack generated unwanted international attention. Iranian state media occasionally publishes announcements claiming to have arrested members of the Zionist Predatory Sparrow network, but these reports are universally viewed as propaganda with no credible evidence. Western intelligence sources note that the tactics and malware used in the Bank Sepah attack have not appeared in subsequent cyber incidents, suggesting the group may have deliberately retired their tools to prevent analysis and replication. But in underground cybersecurity forums, in encrypted messaging channels, in the dark corners of the internet where hackers exchange techniques and celebrate exploits, Predatory Sparrow has achieved legendary status. They're the group that killed a bank. They're the template for the next generation of cyber warriors. On December 2nd, 2025, nearly 6 months after the attack, Bank Sepah remains partially operational but fundamentally broken. Customers can access some services, but complete account histories may never be recovered. Trust in the institution has collapsed. Deposits have plummeted. The bank that once financed Iran's military ambitions now struggles to process basic transactions. Predatory Sparrow succeeded in their stated objective. They severely damaged the IRGC's financial infrastructure. But they also created something far more significant, a blueprint for financial warfare that could destabilize the global economy. The next attack won't be a question of if, but when and where. Every bank, every government, every institution that relies on digital infrastructure is now living with a ghost in their vault, the knowledge that somewhere a group of skilled hackers could be mapping their systems, positioning malware, waiting for the perfect moment to press delete. The Bank Sepah attack proved that in the 21st century, you don't need bombs to destroy a nation. You just need code, determination, and the willingness to cross lines that no one has crossed before. And in the darkness of the digital world, Predatory Sparrow is still out there, watching, waiting, planning. The question isn't whether they'll strike again. The question is, who's next?